Welcome to the Eat for Endurance podcast, where we explore the connection between nutrition, performance, and health for busy, active people. I'm Claire Shorenstein, a sports dietitian and endurance athlete, and in every episode, I share evidence-based guidance, inspiring athlete stories, and practical tips on a wide variety of nutrition topics so that you can feel better, crush your endurance goals, and thrive as a human being. Today's episode is a solo one featuring all your questions and stories that you have shared with me over the past couple of months. This also is my last episode of 2025, as I decided to give myself a little time off at the end of the year, in part so I can take some time to actually prep for next season. So don't worry, it's not a long break. I will be back in January. So here's how this episode is going to go. I'm going to answer all the questions I received, and then I'm going to read some of the messages that came in, plus answers to some questions I asked my Instagram followers and my Fuel for Life crew members last week. It's going to be a really fun episode covering a ton of different topics. So give it a listen, as I'm sure I'm covering something relevant to you. Before we dive in, I have two quick announcements. I just opened up new one-to-one client spots to start in January 2026. If you're interested in working together, I highly recommend filling out a new client inquiry form on my website, eatforendurance.com, this month or next. If I think we're a good fit, I will schedule you for a free discovery call to discuss my programs and answer any questions you might have. You can find information on my one-to-one services and rates, plus tons of testimonials from past clients on my website. If you need support ASAP or you're looking for a lower cost option, you can join my Fuel for Life crew membership year-round to receive direct support from me and from our community of athletes. It's essentially small group coaching, as you get to ask me all your nutrition questions and access all of my resources, plus get live monthly calls for just $30 a month. This rate will be increasing, FYI, to $39 a month on January 1st, but you can lock in my current rate for 3, 6, or even 12 months if you sign up by the end of December. Or just give it a try for 1 month and see if it's for you. Here's what my newest member, Kara, had to say about her first month in the membership. She said, "Amazing value. I love all the classes. The handouts are great. And I love how I'm able to ask questions and how responsive Claire is to answering." Another member recently said, "Deep into training for my first Ironman, I was caught in a downward spiral of losing weight and on the brink of injury. So I joined the Fuel for Life crew and gained access to the priceless tutorials and plans, all of which I could individualize to my own needs and goals. In addition, I could reach out directly to Claire via the group messaging on Slack. She is responsive, thorough, and keeps things interesting and helpful. I attribute finishing my training in first full Ironman as a busy mama of 3 to fueling well thanks to Claire and the community coaching she has thoughtfully developed." Thank you guys so much for those testimonials, and come join the crew if you need some support. We would love to have you. All right, let's get into today's show. My first question comes from a marathon runner who is injured and trying to make changes after many years of underfueling. He's been working hard on his nutrition as well as his mindset towards fueling, and here's the question he sent me. "At times, I feel overwhelmed with trying to keep up with eating all of the things, like get enough protein, making sure my carbs are right, do I have fat in there, etc. Then toss getting the right micronutrients in there, and I find myself having trouble deciding what to eat. How do you not get so overwhelmed with everything?" So first of all, this is such a great question. I know nutrition can be so incredibly overwhelming, totally get it, especially in the beginning when you're doing so many things that are new to you and learning different ways of thinking about food. I find the best way to approach this as a starting point is to take a step back and think about things on a much higher level. So for instance, if you glance down at your meal, do you have a protein, a carb, and a fat, and a fruit and or vegetable? Do you even know what those things are? If not, obviously we got some education to do. So that's kind of the first check. And when my clients are getting really overwhelmed, I sometimes find it easier to just take a step away from any numbers and start visually ballparking things. And, because most people have a general sense of what they were doing previously. So if you are just doing more than you were before, that's progress, obviously. We can get more advanced and precise later when you feel more confident about things. And as for macros, as a starting point, focus on getting a variety of plant foods in. That's really where that quote color piece is, where we're getting a variety of micronutrients and antioxidants and fiber and all that kind of stuff. If you're always eating the same 5 fruits and vegetables, maybe mix it up a bit. Ask yourself, am I always eating the same 2 proteins? Am I eating the same starches? Take a look at variety in your diet, because that will kind of point to maybe you can expose yourself to some different nutrients, stuff like that. And if it's overwhelming, like if that overwhelm starts to take over, I want you just to take a step back, slow everything down, and simplify. For instance, can you focus on just one thing you can improve and save the rest for another time? I know like it is important, of course, to kind of address all these things that you're mentioning when we're working on nutrition, but I don't want you to get so overwhelmed that you like throw your hands up and just walk away from everything and just be like, screw this, I'm not doing any of it. So I'd much rather you pick one thing you can work on, say carbs or whatever. And then once you get comfortable with that, you build upon that. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can use athlete performance plates as rough guides for amounts. For example, if you look down at your plate and only a very small section of your plate is made up of carbohydrates and you're a very active person, then you know that you need to pack more carbs in there. The athlete performance plates, I know they're not giving you really precise amounts, but it can be really useful from the perspective of, oh, wow, I see that I need a hard plate where, half my plate is carbohydrate, but I'm seeing that I only have a little bit on my plate. It's like stuff like that, right? So you just look for those discrepancies. And of course, if you haven't yet read my blog on how much to eat as an endurance athlete, I definitely recommend you read that for more guidance, as it has kind of those visuals in there, as well as some very specific, more numerical guidance. All right, the next few questions are from Amanda, who says that this podcast helps her stay fueled. She asked for a deeper dive into what training the gut actually entails, where to start and how to progress, and tips on how to adjust when things are not working. This is a great question. And this is something I work on with a lot of clients because, as you guys know, GI issues are very common. I actually have an entire module on training the gut in my nutrition course, Peak Performance. I also talk about this in my gut health masterclass. But I will address that here to give kind of a basic rundown of what gut training is and how we might address this. So when we talk about the gut, we're mostly referring to the stomach and the intestines, but really the GI tract, when we're talking about the entire gastrointestinal tract, that consists of everything from your mouth all the way down to your anus, with key organs along the way that play very important roles in the digestive process. The thing to really note about that's relevant to gut training is if you're not absorbing what you're eating and drinking, meaning it's not getting into the bloodstream because you're either vomiting or you have diarrhea or both, then what you're consuming, it's not available to be used, which is obviously a big problem if we're trying to fuel ourselves as athletes, right? So gut training, it's essentially a process that helps the stomach tolerate larger volumes of food and fluids, and it also helps intestines to absorb more carbohydrate or other things, right? But mostly we're talking about carbohydrate here. And this means improved performance and reduced likelihood and severity of GI issues. And with gut training, we can think about fueling before exercise and also fueling during exercise as part of this whole process. The one thing I'll say here is gut training cannot be rushed. I get a lot of people who come to me very close to their goal race and they're like, help, and they're barely eating anything before or during. And it's like, well, there's only so much we can do because you really need at least 2 to 3 months to work on gut training, ideally. All right. So I always encourage my clients to start experimenting with different pre-exercise meals and sports nutrition products and strategies as early as possible in a training cycle, so you have plenty of time to work on it. We also have to be sure that we're ruling out other causes of GI issues because it may be a little bit more complicated than, oh, you took in too much too fast, or that gel didn't sit right, or, et cetera, et cetera. In terms of where to start, it really depends on where you're starting from. That's always I will always tell you whatever we're talking about with nutrition, I always want to know what your current baseline is. You'll hear me say that a lot. So what are you currently doing? If you're exercising on absolutely nothing right now, and you're taking nothing during your training sessions, then obviously we need to start very small and go very slowly. And carbs are absolutely the top priority here. So you may want to start, if we're looking at kind of the pre-exercise meal, let's say, you may want to start with liquids or sports nutrition products, things like a serving of chews or a sports drink or a gel. Those types of things may work well. So if, let's say, you're not eating anything before a long session, but you are taking in some things during, the easiest thing you can do is take those things that sit okay in your stomach during your session and also take them before. So we're just getting calories, getting carbs into your body as a starting point. You also, you don't have to start there. You can certainly start with small amounts of like low fat, low fiber, easy to digest carbohydrate, things like an applesauce pouch or some graham crackers or half a banana or rice cake. And again, we're talking small amounts of really simple carbohydrates. You can progress to this point too. So let's say you wanted to start with sports nutrition products and those sat okay, and then you progress to these easy to digest solid carbohydrates. That's also fine. You can do a combination of both to get your carb intake up. There's no one right way to do this here, as is often the case when we're talking about nutrition. The important thing is that you're being really consistent with taking something in and you're tracking what works and what doesn't. The other thing to keep in mind is timing. So obviously, the more time you have, the more food you may be able to tolerate. And I have tons of information out there on what to eat before short and long sessions, as well as what to take in during long sessions over on my blog, on my website, eatforendurance.com. So definitely go check those posts out. You'll get tons and tons of information there. And eventually, once you are consistently fueling before exercise, I want you to see if you can build upon that. So if you're, for instance, up to tolerating one whole banana, can you have a banana with a little peanut butter to get a little bit of protein, something that's a little bit more satiating in there, especially if you're out there for a long time? Or if you're having a piece of toast with jam or just the plain toast or something, can you add a little jam, peanut butter, whatever to that? Can you do peanut butter banana toast? Can you build on these things? Or if you're doing 1 graham cracker, can you work up to 3 or 4 graham crackers? Again, there's lots of ways to do this, but the idea is that we are building upon what we're doing to get more in. So that's kind of the important thing. Again, keep a journal, track it, see what's working, see what isn't, be consistent, and gradually increase your intake over time until you reach your fueling goals. And then as for during exercise, there are certain established guidelines that we're typically aiming for. So for instance, let's take like 60, 90 grams of carbs per hour during an endurance activity longer than 2.5 hours. So that's a very established one. So for something like this, if you're only taking in like 1 gel or 20 to 25 grams of carbs an hour right now, I do not recommend that you suddenly jump to 60 grams an hour unless you have a really solid stomach and you feel very adventurous. But try to find a carb goal that feels comfortable to you, whether that's 30 grams or 40 grams or whatever. Stay there for a little while in your training. And once you're tolerating where you're at and that feels really comfortable and good, then you're gradually increasing your grams per hour towards that goal. So let's say the goal is 60, right? So you can gradually increase towards that. Or once you're tolerating 60, can you push a little bit higher? So we can kind of just like start working on that, and you can take in gels more often. You can add sports drink. You can eat carb-rich foods. Again, there are lots of different ways of doing this. And then I would just say if you are taking in solid foods, really making sure that you're choosing a lower fat, kind of low protein option that is mostly just carbs to make it a lot easier in your gut. Also, don't forget about fluids and sodium. Hydration mishaps play a huge role in GI issues. So again, first thing you do is establish what your baseline is, i.e. how much fluid are you currently taking in per hour? Compare that to your sweat rate, which you can measure yourself. I have a whole blog post about it, so go grab that, and there's a worksheet and everything. And you can gradually increase if you're well below where you should be. There are a few other things to point out about gut training. The main one being that we can't forget about the everyday diet. So we may be able to increase the number and activity of our glucose transporters by eating more carbs in the everyday diet. So that's like a really, really cool, awesome thing. More research is needed here, as often is the case, but we already know how important carbs are for performance. And in this case, consuming enough carbs allows for greater tolerance and absorption of carbs during exercise over time. So that's just another reason, like reason 1 million to work towards those everyday carb guidelines that I've mentioned a million times on the podcast. And if you're not sure what those are, you again, go to my blog, post about how much you should eat as an endurance athlete. I also have a post, I think it's called Best Carbs for Runners. Obviously, if you're a runner, it still applies to you. Go check that out. The guidelines are on there, including why it's important, the reasoning behind carbs, all that. And then a couple other things to keep in mind, because I'm trying to answer this question as thoroughly as possible. In an ideal world, you're getting a chance to train in similar conditions and also at a similar intensity level as your event. Like, I'm assuming you're training for an event here, right? So for instance, if your race is going to be hot and you have a chance to train somewhere warm, it's going to allow you to practice what it's like to have a higher sweat rate and to take in and tolerate higher amounts of fluids and salts, because we know that in heat, GI issues are way more common, and and our gut tolerance can go down because the blood is kind of going away from the gut. So you can get that kind of sloshy, icky feeling. So if you can't go somewhere warm, what can you do? I mean, you can still train with slightly higher intakes of fluid to, quote, train the stomach. You can do heat training with the help of a sauna, stuff like that. The stomach really is often where things can go wrong. So I mentioned that kind of sloshy, bloated feeling that some athletes complain about. That can occur from a combination of heat, high carb intake, high intensity exercise, especially if an athlete hasn't practiced consuming as much as they need in those conditions, or, it's not it's not uncommon for someone to go out a little too fast compared to where they should be, that kind of stuff. And of course, for carbs, we know that when you're racing, you burn through your carbohydrate more quickly and need to sustain your performance. But at the same time, higher intensities can reduce GI tolerance. So there's kind of a lot going on in this whole gut training thing. But really, like, the bottom line is you should be practicing taking in the amount of carbohydrate that you plan on taking in during the race while going at the same intensity. So obviously you may not be, if you're running an ultra, like, you're not going to be running 100 miles in training or anything like that. Or if you're running marathon pace, like, you're not doing the whole 26.2 at marathon pace, but you are probably doing training runs with marathon pace worked in. So you can kind of practice that kind of thing. You can, eat while power hiking up a mountain or whatever makes sense for your sport, right? So again, the idea is that you're taking in fuel while working hard, and this is going to help your gut adapt. And the last thing I'll say is that you can try eating your pre-exercise meal or snack and allowing less time to digest if you want. This isn't for everybody. I obviously don't want you to vomit or poop your pants. So please only do this if you're not having other issues tolerating pre-exercise nutrition. But for instance, you could do something like this before an easy effort, because we expect some stomach discomfort in that situation. And really, as long as it's fairly mild, that's fine. All right. So all that said, if you can't even tolerate small amounts of liquids or solids without having GI issues before or during exercise, and especially if you're also having GI issues at other points in the day, this really tells me that something else might be going on. And that's a totally different conversation. Chronic GI issues during and especially outside of exercise is a really great reason to seek out a sports dietitian. So if you're having those issues, feel free to reach out to me or whoever else you would like to reach out to. All right, on to our next question. With the rise of GLP-1 and CGM use by pro athletes, everyone is hyper aware of blood sugar sensitivity. This person wants to know how some people, like diabetics, may need different fueling strategies than the general population. So yes, this definitely is a bit of a hot topic, especially with the GLP-1. I'm actually not going to deep dive into this one. I just want to refer you back to my blood sugar episode. That was episode 109 with fellow sports RD Hayden James. It was a really awesome episode. We covered all the basics of how blood sugar is affected by exercise, the use of CGMs in sport, and so much more. So go give that a listen, as I think it will answer your questions. And if you're new here and you're listening to this and you missed that episode, it was one of my most popular, really great episodes. All right, I have a lot of listeners who are registered dietitians, and this person asked for tips for dietitians looking at becoming a certified sports RD, including how I became one myself. So I'll give some quick background for non-dietitians, as I know many of you are in my audience, because you might be interested to know what it even takes to become a dietitian, as well as a certified specialist in sports dietetics, or a CSSD like me. So first, to become an RD or RDN, you can use both credentials. You need a bachelor's and master's degree in nutrition. You need to complete a dietech internship program with 1,200 hours of supervised practice. And I will just point out that even getting into an internship program is very, very difficult. And you literally have to pay to work. So financially, it sucks. And then you have to pass the National RD Board exam, complete 75 hours of continuing education every 5 years to keep your credential, adhere to a professional code of ethics, and you may need to get additional licenses, which just means paying more money to practice medical nutrition therapy in different states, and every state is different. I feel like I'm really not selling my profession very well, am I, guys? And then if you want to, you can specialize in specific areas of nutrition and get certain certifications. So this really is only required or important if you work for like a special organization or an academic institution, something like that. So to become a certified sports dietitian or a CSSD, you need to practice as an RD for at least 2 years. And the big one is that you need 2,000 documented hours of sports nutrition experience as a dietitian within the past 5 years. So that's the one where like a lot of people struggle with. And you can substitute certain education and professional experiences for up to 500 hours of that requirement. And then and only then are you eligible to sit for the lovely CSSD board exam. It is grueling. It's a very expensive test. And then you need to retake the exam along with providing 1,500 documented hours of sports nutrition experience every 5 years to renew the credential. I am actually up for renewal this coming spring. A bunch of my colleagues have been taking it recently. I've been seeing it and it's like, oh God, I am dreading it. If I'm honest, very much dreading it because the test sucks. But as you can see, this is a very different thing from just like taking a online sports nutrition course or whatever else. So it's why I'm always quick to point out that there is a really big difference between a registered dietitian and an uncredentialed nutritionist and how much work it takes to go that extra step to become a CSSD. So with all that out of the way, why did I get my CSSD and how did I accrue all my hours? Well, to be honest, I majorly procrastinated sitting for my exam, plus the pandemic set things back and having kids and all that. So, and in addition to that, technically, I do not actually need to be a CSSD because I work for myself. And to be honest, no one really cares and many people don't know about it. If I have one or not, I'm really the only one. But I decided it was important. I really did it for myself. And I know I talk about it a lot. So I got it. I want to keep it up. And I finally took the test in 2021 when I'd been an RD for over 6 years. So at that point, I'd been working with athletes for almost the entire time I was an RD, primarily through my own private practice, but I also saw additional clients through 3 other practices. I was freelancing a lot. I also gave a lot of nutrition talks to various teams in New York City, volunteered a bit with athletic organizations, and altogether between all of those things, I was able to kind of gather up my hours over that time. If you're not currently a sports RD and you want to be, I just start learning and working in the field and seizing whatever opportunities you have to work with athletes to build up your hours. Honestly, I'm sure there are other dietitians out there who have much better advice to give who work in the collegiate or professional athletic space, but that is what I have to say on that topic. All right, next question. One of my Fuel for Life members asked the following. I would love more information on determining calories needed per day and how to estimate body fat percent. Even though I've stepped up my carbs, I think my calories might be low. All right. So just for context, guys, this is a marathon runner who was drastically underfueling, especially with her carbs. She had lost weight during training, wasn't feeling her best. So with all that in mind, this is how I'd answer this question. As a starting point, I'd really focus first on building up your meals and snacks and eating consistently. And you can calculate out some macro targets. So for instance, I'm usually going with somewhere around at least 1 gram of fat per kilogram of body weight per day. Ideally, if you're an endurance athlete, we're really going for at least 5 grams per kilogram of carbohydrate. But again, where's that baseline? I think this person was well under 3 grams per kilogram. So 3 grams per kilogram was her kind of next big goal, as if you can believe it. But maybe we're aiming for somewhere between 3 and 5 grams per kilogram and at least 1.4 grams per kilogram of protein. As I think I mentioned earlier, like we don't always have to use numbers, but sometimes numbers can be helpful goalposts, especially if you're kind of tracking your caloric intake just to see where you're at. And then also we take a more qualitative approach, like in my food journaling exercise, which you can download for free from my website, there are lots more questions in there that I provide that are totally not number-based at all, that you can ask yourself to help determine if you're eating enough. And that's thinking about things like sleep and energy and recovery and performance and mood and so many other things that you can kind of just think about and that are very much affected by whether or not you're eating enough. Now, there are equations we can use to calculate caloric needs. If you want to know the specific ones, one is called Harris-Benedict and the other one is Mifflin-St. Jeor. Those are two research-based equations, but they're estimates, and you have to add an activity factor. And I'm not necessarily advocating that you're doing this on your own. I do often average those two equations when I'm working with one-to-one clients to get a very loose sense of a caloric range that I'm using for myself. And sometimes I'm giving the information to clients depending on who they are. But we're not consistently calorie counting. We're really just spot checking once in a while. So it's really important to be able to check in with your body and other signs of whether or not you're eating, quote, enough. In terms of body fat percent, I'm really not typically using that with clients. I'm not calculating it out with anybody. Like, yes, it could be helpful. For instance, there's an equation that I play around with when determining energy availability and to see if someone is low energy availability or getting enough, and to kind of see again what that minimum amount of calories are to meet their needs. So we can kind of play around with that. And you do need body fat, or at least an estimate of that for this equation. But this isn't really something like, this is something I'm doing on my end. I'm never having clients play around with that. And unless someone's really gotten a DEXA scan or something really more specifically related to here is your body fat percent, I'm not really kind of playing around with that number so much. You certainly can get a DEXA scan. That can be helpful to see kind of your muscle mass, your body fat percent, obviously your bone health. Like, these things are good to know, especially if you're really concerned, if you have access to that testing, because obviously it can be expensive. But otherwise, I really wouldn't pay too close attention to body fat percentage. The only thing I'd say about the body fat percent from a health standpoint, I think about it more in the context of fertility as a male or female athlete, because you do need to have a minimum amount of body fat in order to have, for instance, a regular monthly cycle. I actually just released a great episode on fertility for anyone interested. It was the prior episode, in case you missed it, so go check it out. Next question. I often feel like at meal times, I force myself to eat more than I am hungry for because I've convinced myself that I, quote, need the extra calories to support my training, even though I know that I'm getting what I need without the overeating. This generally leads to bloating and not feeling great, but I seem to have trapped myself in this mindset. Any tips for how to control this sort of thinking? All right, so I'd want to know, have you tried tracking in an app like Chronometer or whatever you use to objectively see how much you're actually eating? Like the reason why I'm asking that is, how do you actually know that you're getting what you need? This person sounds very confident that they know what they're getting, what they need. So that would be one thing I maybe just challenge you on, just to double check. Are you really getting what you need? You can absolutely listen to your body, but as athletes, and I've talked about this a lot, sometimes our cues can be off. Sometimes we're not hungry and we need to eat more, right? So we can't always rely on hunger cues. So I do want you to honor your body, but also to be intentional with your fueling and to not always just listen to your body. The other thing you can kind of pay attention to is, well, if I eat according to my cues, what do I end up eating? Like, you could track a day where you're like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to eating to the point where I'm satisfied, not stuffed. What do I actually eat? Do I end up under eating? Do I eat enough? So you can kind of play around with all of this. You can also try strategies like, okay, instead of eating more of a starch, can I add juice to hit my carb goals? Or am I eating too much fiber? Is that why I'm getting so full? So we can kind of pick this apart a little bit. The other thing I would look at is the whole bloating stuff. Like, is it normal stomach expansion following a meal because you're full, or is it actual painful bloating? Sometimes people get these two things confused. There's a difference. How long does the bloating feeling last? When does it happen? Making sure, for instance, you're slowing down when you eat, you're chewing well, you're stopping yourself before you feel overly full or that bloated feeling. And, again, kind of seeing, well, how much are you eating? So this is all going to take some experimentation, but that's where I would start. That's what I would explore. Another person shares, I just finished a week-long work conference. Keeping myself hydrated and eating well at these events is always a struggle, as there are lots of meetings and group meals. Would love to hear your tips. So I'm sure you guys already know I'm going to talk about snacks. You know how I feel about snacks. And I never travel anywhere without my snacks. And you can, of course, find all my travel snack ideas in my recent podcast episode, as well as in a blog post, free download, masterclass. I talk about snacks everywhere. If you're new here, maybe you didn't know that, but I'm sure most of you know that. So when you have a really busy work day, and especially when you're kind of out of your routine and out of your house, and especially if you traveled very far, I really want to make sure that you've prioritized a solid breakfast. So that could be where you're staying, in your hotel or Airbnb or wherever you're at. Maybe you're, going to the office and that's where they serve food, wherever it is, it's really important to get that first meal in, especially if you're exercising in the morning, because there are a lot of people who are, running or biking or doing whatever they're doing in the morning before their busy days. So really get that meal in. If your hotel has a mini fridge, even better. You can keep things like yogurt or fruit or other snacks in there. If you happen to have time to go to a local store and stock up a little bit before the craziness begins for your conference or your work, time at work. Lunch during the day and snacks, that's where things often get tricky for people because they're caught up in, meetings and other things that are going on, especially if food isn't provided by your work. So see if you can pick up a sandwich on your way in the morning, or maybe you're cobbling together a quote snack lunch with a variety of snacks that are more filling. Another idea, if a work trip just happened, I would love for you to make note of where specifically you struggled the most while it's fresh in your head, so you can plan accordingly for next time. And maybe certain things might be very specific to that situation. Maybe it's going to be different next time. Maybe you travel to the same place every time and it will be applicable to next time. So I would just kind of do a post-mortem and see if you can get some good takeaways from your most recent experience. And lastly, try not to stress if things aren't perfect. Just do your best. It's a finite amount of time and you'll get back to your routine soon. All right, so now that we've gone through some questions, I wanted to switch gears and read a handful of messages that I received from listeners sharing their experiences with me. I also just want to let you guys know that it means so much to get these responses from you. It's very validating, especially for all those times I feel like I'm just like talking into the void. I've been podcasting for a very long time now, over 6 years, and it really means a lot when I get any kind of message from you, any request, any feedback. So thank you to everyone who reached out, who submitted questions, who sent me these messages. Before I read some of these responses, I just wanted to give a quick announcement. If you are looking for a super fun way to support this free podcast content, my new fueling themed stickers are in stock and ready to ship. I made 6 colorful designs in different shapes and sizes, including Make Carbs Great Again, Friends Don't Let Friends Underfuel, Bagels Are My Spirit Animal, Fueled for Adventure, Carbs Are My Love Language, and the Eat for Endurance podcast logo. They're just $18 for all 6 stickers with free US shipping, or you can grab my favorite one, Make Carbs Great Again, for $5. Head to the shop page of eatforendurance.com to purchase them. And while you're there, you can check out all my affiliate codes with discounts for tons of great brands like Tailwind, Scratch, Momentous, and more to shop for your favorite sports nutrition products while supporting the podcast at no extra cost to you. All right, let's get back to it. So first, I have an email from Sam thanking me for being so positive about food. Here's what he had to say. I think we all grow up with mixed messages about food. Both my wife and I have found your positive and affirming take incredibly beneficial. Specifically, I want to call out that episode with Colette from Scratch about hydration. Figuring out my sodium needs has been a real win for my racing. I just took podium at a 50K for the first time last weekend, in part because of good fueling and hydration, much of which I learned from your show. So first of all, so amazing, Sam. Huge congrats on that. And I'm so glad you're enjoying the podcast. All right, next up, I got this DM from Jennifer who said, I'm listening to your podcast on the flight to Chicago Marathon. I'm recovering from REDS, so I listen to lots of podcasts to set my mind in a good place and remind me why I need to fuel. Yours is always on the playlist, so thank you. That's awesome, Jennifer. Keep up the good work. I know recovering from REDS is really not easy. It's a long road, and I hope your Chicago Marathon went really well. I got this comment on YouTube This person said, I'm so happy I discovered your podcast. I appreciate the permission to eat convenience foods and love the reminder that what's more harmful than that is not eating. I wish more busy women would realize that fueling consistently and adequately will give us more brain power and energy to do even more cool stuff. Thank you for talking about all of this. Yes, oh my God, so true. Thank you for those messages. I agree 1000% with all of that. So I'm glad to hear that everything is resonating. All right. I asked many of you to answer 3 questions and thought it would be fun to share some of the answers. My first question was, what's one positive change you've made this year that has impacted your everyday and or performance nutrition? My friend Sarah, the one I just visited in Portugal, said, eating breakfast. It's simple and life-changing. I love talking to you about how important basic small changes like that are. It's easy to get information overload and skip to something way more complex. Starting with the basics goes a long way in many things. Nutrition is no exception. Go figure. I really love this one. She actually also asked me if she should take probiotics for gut health, and it was such a great example of how often people skip ahead to more complicated things like supplements, either because they don't know any better or because they're looking for a shortcut. In her case, she just didn't know, and I pointed out all the basic things that she could be doing to support better gut health without involving a probiotic that would lead to noticeable positive change. The message is, of course, being never skip the basics, and small, consistent changes can lead to really big change. By the way, I just published a whole blog post about my travel, food, and running adventures during my week of exploring Portugal, in case anyone is interested. It was seriously the most fantastic trip, and it was so fun to share my favorite food spots, all the epic views of Porto, Gaia, and everywhere else we went, the beautiful runs I went on, and of course, all my top travel tips for active people like you guys, wherever you happen to be. You can check it out over at eatforendurance.com. It was just such a blast. And I was so grateful to have such a rare opportunity to take a break from everyday life and my kids and all of that. I don't think I had traveled by myself since my 20s. And I'm 44. So that was really nice. And also, I apologize, my voice, I am getting over yet another cold. So excuse my scratchiness while I talk through all these things here. All right, here's another answer to my question. A member from Fuel for Life crew said, I started eating carbs with every meal again and coming much closer to prescribed carb goals before and during training events. The change was huge, and I attribute faster rebound and recovery to the improved nutrition as well. My body comp didn't really change, but my mental clarity and energy are better. Caffeine dependence is way down, and I just feel less fatigue. That's so awesome. This was an Ironman athlete, and she absolutely crushed it. So I'm super stoked about that one. Another listener answered, I learned a lot about long distance and time fueling and solved the miraculous conception ultra baby, less fat and no bubbly soda. Oh yeah, the bloating, that uncomfortable feeling that ultramarathoners normally get. I get that. So I'm glad to hear, listener, that you had solved that problem. That definitely is a positive change. All right, another response was someone saying that she's not having coffee anymore until she's had a real breakfast. So yeah, some people do find that really helpful. I think it's fine if you're having coffee and then eating a little bit later, as long as the gap isn't too big. But yes, we do not want you to be fueling with just caffeine in the morning. That's a big no-no. And here's my response. So a positive change that I've made recently, I would say it's drinking juice daily. I mean, I definitely have had juice for many years now, but I didn't really start having it every day or even twice a day until this year. Like, it's been really consistent. I'm really enjoying it. It's such a great way to increase my carbohydrate, and it's delicious and it hydrates me, and I'm obsessed with juice. So for me, it's my fresh squeezed tangerine juice. I normally get that at Trader Joe's, and the Palm Wonderful pomegranate juice. Those are my 2 favorites. All right, the second question I asked was what everyone is most proud of. Here are some of those answers. I am most proud of completing Ironman Sacramento and managing to keep Sundays for church and my family and free of training except for race day, of course. Awesome answer. Another person said, shifting my mindset away from worrying about weight gain and focusing more on strength gain. I love that so much. We got some proud race moment answers, including running a 50 miler. And another one was running a marathon PR. And one of my members shared, I did my first ever half marathon open water swim. I felt so good and strong and finished 7th in my age group. So congrats to everyone on those race accomplishments. That's awesome. And for me personally, here's my answer. This one might seem a little bit silly. I am really proud of getting back into reading fiction. I know it's not related to nutrition or exercise at all, but I see it as being related to mental health. So I took a really long break from reading for no real reason at all, but I really wanted to start reading again. But every time I thought about it, I got so overwhelmed, like I just didn't know what to read. So I knew there were a million books out there. Everyone kept posting, oh, I love this book. And I just never really knew where to start. And so finally I was just like, screw it. I'm just going to start. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to gather a list of a bunch of random recommendations and literally just pick one. I'm just going to recommend a bunch from the library, and whatever is available first, I'm going to read. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been devouring books, like reading. I've just been literally devouring them. It's been so fun. It's been great for my mental health. It's made me get off my phone and not be on screens constantly. And I'd say it's not great for sleep, because the problem is when I read a good book, I don't want to put it down. So my whole I'm just going to read one chapter, and then I read a lot of chapters. So maybe not for sleep so much, but it's been really, really good. So that's my answer to that question. And my third question was what everyone is still struggling with. So here are a few responses I got. Saving money on groceries that are quick and convenient. Yes, I feel this one deeply. Food is so expensive. I'm constantly trying not to waste food or let it go bad in the fridge, but I could do better here too. I actually think I should create some content around this topic. What do you guys think? Would you be up for that? I think you would be. All right, another response. I'm battling how to still fuel well while feeling like I'm, quote, barely working out compared to the end of my training program. And similarly, another person said, still working on understanding food cue changes when training shifts, work in progress. So for sure, that whole transition from endurance training to off season can be really tough one for most people. I'm currently working with a lot of one-to-one clients on this because a lot of people just completed their big fall races. And in those weeks, right after a big event, I would say try not to stress about this. Keep in mind that your body's recovering from a really big effort and you need to refuel well to replenish your body's nutrient stores. Also, it's nice just to take a mental break from it all after you've trained so hard and just rest and enjoy food and just not worry about any of this stuff. But usually I'd say after a week or two, you may want to start thinking a little bit more intentionally about this stuff. I mean, not like you're not being intentional with recovery. Of course you are. But, you're probably resuming some form of training again. And the key thing here is you always want to match your fueling to your activity level. So some people are still really active in the off season, or maybe you're even prepping for your next race. Like maybe you're not really taking a break. It's not an off season. So I would just say if you're not training for anything specifically, but you're still putting in a ton of exercise hours, you really still have to fuel that through everyday and performance nutrition. And actually, I just contributed a ton to a blog post coming out on the Carbs Fuel website, and it's all about off-season nutrition. I think it's coming out any day now. So I would keep an eye out for that. I think it should be out by the time this episode comes out. I'll share it in my newsletter and on socials. So that should give more information about this whole kind of transition and where you should be at with nutrition and how to support yourself in this in-between phase. And lastly, another person says, I'm struggling with negative thoughts when I see the weight I've gained around my stomach. I feel great when I'm exercising. I have lots of energy and can push harder than ever, but then I feel my clothes hitting me differently and I have to block out that negativity. Yes. So this one is so tough. I feel you. It's a really common struggle, especially with my clients who have a history of underfueling, who are working really hard on increasing their intake. And then of course their body's changing to that, right? It's in flux, it's in transition. So more transition stuff, right? Transitions are hard, change is hard. So I always encourage people, to buy at least a few new pieces of clothing that are comfortable and to help you feel at least a little more neutral about your body. You don't have to feel positive about it, but can we work towards feeling a little more neutral as you work on fueling better? Another thing is focusing on the positives that you are feeling along, what is a long journey. So this person had pointed out some of those things. So, are you sleeping better or performing better? Do you have better energy, whatever else? Really use those as goalposts along your journey and hold on to those because they are tangible things that you can really cling to. And yeah, remember, this is a period of transition. Your body is in flux right now as you're working on recovering from low energy availability. So another thing you might want to work on, or actually you should work on, I highly recommend you work on, is developing body image skills. And I talk extensively about this in my body image masterclass, Fueling with Compassion, that goes over practical tools for, navigating clothing and the scale and social triggers, as well as some mindset shifts you can work on and sensory tools that you can use to help you self-regulate and respect your body. And you can grab that over my website if anyone else is also struggling. All right, guys. Well, that's all I have for you today. I am starting to work on my episode lineup for 2026. I only have one guest booked right now, which means that all of you can reach out and let me know what you want to hear on the show next year. I'm planning to do a few more solo episodes on very specific topics, and I'll, of course, be bringing on some more dietitians and athletes to share their stories. So you can expect a lot of the same, nothing too crazy that will be changing. But of course, I want to hear from you because I am doing this for myself. I may enjoy it, but ultimately this is all for you guys. And I want to make sure that I'm covering the things you want to learn more about. If you are interested in being a guest on the show, if you know someone who'd make a great guest, or again, if you want to reach out with a topic in mind that you'd like me to cover, email me at claire@eatforendurance.com. All right. That wraps up this season. Gosh, I put out a lot of episodes this year. If you're enjoying the podcast, I would be so grateful if you share it with a friend or on social media and leave a 5-star rating and review if you haven't already. And of course, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I'm over on YouTube. If you are not currently watching this and you want to start watching, you can go subscribe to my YouTube channel. I, of course, put out the video content of these episodes, but I also put out other shorts and other fun things. So I would love to see you on over there. If you'd like to support my free content, you can check out my affiliate codes on the shop page of eatforendurance.com. You can visit my Patreon page. That's linked to in the show notes. And of course, you can grab my stickers, buy a hat, lots of ways to support me. And if you haven't already grabbed all my free resources and you want more consistent support, head on over to eatforendurance.com. I have so much stuff over there. I've mentioned my blogs in this episode. I've talked about Fuel for Life Crew. There's my free stuff. Just lots and lots of stuff that is free or really affordable because I really, really want to make nutrition information accessible to as many people as possible. And finally, I wanted to thank you all for listening and being so supportive this year and for my 6+ years of doing this show. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. I'll be back in the new year. See you guys next time.